Romero, I'm not leaving you. I'm just going to get some water. I'll be right back.
No worries. Enjoy.
Okay, everybody, just want to give everybody a heads up. We are live on social media on our town's Facebook as well as YouTube channels. Ms. Elizabeth Goldstein will go ahead and give you the announcement at 10:05 once we begin the webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is enjoying your Wednesday morning. Thank you for joining us for this HR webinar sponsored by Bank United. If you missed our other 3 webinars, you can find it on the Town of Miami Lakes YouTube channel. And the town would like to express, and its Economic Development Committee would like to express its sincerest gratitude to Bank United for sponsoring this event. And before I hand it off to our wonderful speakers this morning, I would like to introduce Mr. Chris Perry, the Executive Vice President of Human Resources, Chris Perry joined Bank United as Executive Vice President of Human Resources in October 2012 with responsibility for all aspects of human resources. His responsibilities include strategy and planning at all levels: recruitment, talent management, benefits, compensation, payroll, and employee relations, leadership development, and training. Prior to joining Bank United, Chris served for 8 years as the Senior Human Resources Executive for Memorial Hospital West, which is part of the Memorial Healthcare System in Broward County, Florida. His background includes more than 25 years of extensive related human resources leadership experience with organizations such as Union Bank of Florida, Cleveland Clinic of Florida, and the Miami Heart Institute. Chris is a graduate of University of Florida with a Bachelor's of Arts in History and Nova Southeastern University with a Master's of Business Administration, and has been recognized twice by the South Florida Business Journal as a power leader in human resources, and also received the Excellence in Human Resources Leadership Award by South Florida Business and Wealth. And it is my pleasure to hand off the screen to Mr. Chris Perry. Chris, the screen is all yours.
Wow, Elizabeth, thank you very much. You're reminding me how old I'm getting. Gosh, but all that's true. I've been very fortunate and blessed in my career to work for some great organizations, but even better to have such great leadership and bosses along the way that have mentored me within human resources. I want to say good morning to everybody who's joined us. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I certainly hope that this morning finds you and your family safe and well during these times. So with that being said, I want to spend just a few minutes about what we're doing at Bank United in regard to human resources and taking care of our customers. When we immediately went into this in March, nobody expected it. We literally evacuated our corporate office within a matter of 2 days once we made the decision of a work from home split. Thankfully, the bank is considered an essential business. So, number one is taking care of our customers. So we're very, very proud of our branch employees who stayed and never missed a day servicing our customers. But at the same time, our number one priority is the safety of our employees. And for those of you out there that own your own businesses, obviously realize that. And, employees right now are stressed more than they ever have. Talk to anybody who's working from home that have children that are online schooling right now. It is a major, major challenge to balance work life when you're working from home. And, oh, by the way, you have children that you're trying to educate as well. So very, very trying times for businesses. And then obviously taking care of your employees. A couple things I want to share with you that really we focus on heavily is employee wellness at Bank United. We're very fortunate. We have a wellness coordinator who's literally a professional bodybuilder. She reminds me on a regular basis that she's going to hurt me if I don't start working out more regularly. So, it's a fantastic thing to have that we've done virtual classes on a daily basis for our employees from a wellness perspective. We went heavily realizing we needed to engage with our employees, knowing that we have about 1,500 employees spread out over 24 states, but mainly the majority of our employees are right here in South Florida. So with that being said, 20% were still out in the branches working, 80% from home. We knew we needed to engage with those employees immediately. So we have sent out best practices on how to stay engaged with your employees. We've had classes for employees. We've had classes for managers. We have regular educational offerings. So it's a lot to pivot into that to make sure that the well-being of your employee, and everybody on this call knows that if your employees aren't happy and engaged, it's very difficult for them to be productive, right? So two things that are on the agenda are our return to office, that we have a task force, a business continuity task force at Bank United, which includes our executive officers of the bank. I'm a part of that task force, and we work very, very closely, talk, at the beginning daily, multiple times a week now, as far as, our return to office. And we'll only do that when we have a very safe environment to return our employees to. And we've been working around the clock to have touchless everything in our Miami Lakes office. So that's in progress. We gave all of our employees 10 days of special circumstances right off the bat, just to say, listen, if you got a child issue, don't worry about missing a day of work. We're going to pay you for it. There's some tax breaks that go along with that. I'm not a tax consultant, so for the business people here, you definitely want to be talking to your tax advisors about downtime. where the government will help you with that. It's very important. We had people that did not have direct deposit. We just went direct deposit to everybody overnight. We ran our first payroll offsite, which we have never done virtually. So there's just a lot of things that had to happen overnight. I'm very proud of the HR team, our employees that have stayed engaged. We have a great group of employees that work at Bank United. I'm so fortunate to be an HR leader with a company that has employees that are dedicated and as passionate to servicing our customers, and equally as important, taking care of each other. You'd be surprised at the camaraderie and collaboration that we have at the bank. It's very refreshing. So I know I've kind of covered a lot this morning. We're going to talk about the workforce of the future. I have the distinct pleasure of getting to introduce the co-speaker today and this morning, Ramiro Nguanzo, and he has just got a decorated background. And if I read his entire bio this morning, I'm going to pull it up here. We'd be on for probably another hour. So Ramiro is currently the deputy city manager at Val Harbor Village, Florida. He's assistant day-to-day management. He's including serving as director of tourism and economic development, communications, and the big part is he's the human resources executive over there as well. So he assists in guiding police and building functions. So he has a huge job with the city of Val Harbor. From 2012 to 2015, he has served as a senior advisor to the college president at Miami-Dade, one of the largest institutions in the United States. He oversaw many different roles in that leadership capacity. Prior to that, he was a chief of staff to the city manager and director of human resources for the city of Miami Beach. That was another very large job where he had many responsibilities. Prior to that, he was director of leadership development at the Council for Excellence in Government in Washington, D.C., where he coordinated many leadership activities. He's a graduate from my arch rival over there at FSU, which is a great school within the state of Florida. He has many certificates in leadership and training and development. It's my distinct pleasure to once again welcome and introduce Ramiro Nguanzo. Ramiro?
Chris, thank you so much, and good morning to everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Human Resources in Today's Economy. And also thank you to the Town of Miami Lakes, the town's Economic Development Committee, and Bank United for hosting this session. You've done several. I've had a chance to watch a few, so I compliment the town for engaging our community in these important discussions. And thank you for inviting me. As Chris just mentioned, I've served as a Human Resources Director for over 20 years now in the public sector, first with the city of Miami Beach, and now more recently with the village of Val Harbor. And Chris, given your extensive background in HR in both banking and the medical fields, this is really going to be more of a discussion between you and I. You've shared some of your insight and experiences over the last 6 months already, but I think there's a lot more that you in your role and Bank United have done. So I'll look forward to hearing more about that in a few minutes. The role of human resources continues to evolve as a factor in the workplace, and changes have been coming, daily in the last couple of months. Since the pandemic hit, it's impacted our economy, our society, our workforce in ways that we've never seen before. For many of us, the coronavirus has been the most significant and perhaps the most traumatic experience of our lives. It will have a huge impact on us as individuals, as a society, and as a workforce well into the future. It's already dramatically changed the way we live and work. It affected virtually every element of life. Grocery suppliers were disruptive, and as a result, there were shortages of many items. Not now, thankfully, but a few weeks and months ago, we went to grocery stores and it was hard to find the basic items that we needed. Food and toilet paper and cleaning supplies and all those things that we've always taken for granted. Schools, like Chris just mentioned that Bank United did, went from in-person to virtual overnight. They stopped on a Friday afternoon, and by Monday, the next day, after the weekend, we're already educating our kids the best way they could in virtual platforms. The majority of people, as Chris described, at Bank United went from one day to the next, working in their offices to working from home. Things we had taken for granted, like trips to the doctors or dentists, hair salons, gyms, parks, beaches, and so many other things were not permitted for periods of time. We had curfews in place, and we still do in Miami-Dade and Broward County. We've never seen that unless there was some kind of natural disaster or emergency. I happened to be on a call this morning with some municipal officials, some mayors and city managers, talking to the medical doctors that are advising our county and our cities. And when the issue of the curfew came up, their solid recommendation is keep it in place for as long as possible to avoid people congregating. There's a lot of pressure from certain industries, particularly restaurants and those type of entities, to at least roll it back. So I know Mayor Jimenez has said he's considering pushing the curfew back from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. But again, the doctors on today's calls all were emphatic that please, if you're going to do that, wait at least a week. Let the impacts of what happened over the long holiday weekend that we just had kind of take effect, and don't make any changes until at least a week from now. Although it's hard to imagine right now, the coronavirus crisis will eventually end and things will get back to some level of our old normal, but in many ways to a new normal. The coronavirus has become the accelerator for one of the greatest workplace transformations of our lifetime. How and where we work, how we exercise and where we exercise, where we shop and how we shop, how and where we learn, and how we communicate has already changed so much and will continue to evolve in the next few months and into the future. As a result of the pandemic, an estimated 2.7 billion people, or more than 4 out of 5 workers in the global workforce, have been affected in some way by lockdowns and safer at home measures. Businesses and government leaders have been challenged to both respond to the crisis quickly and rethink their workforce strategies in real time. Most organizations' first priority has been crisis response and emphasizing health, safety, and essential services and the visualization of work and education. Now, as organizations begin to emerge from this response phase, leaders are focusing on the next set of workforce challenges as they plan for the recovery, making sure that they deal with the present situation and manage continuity. In the recovery phase, an organization learns from its response phase and emerges stronger. It is important to realize that the recovery won't be static. It will not occur on a specific date. It will be eventual. COVID-19 is unlikely to end suddenly, given the uncertain prospects and timing of a vaccine. The recovery phase will be a gradual transition and must include a spectrum of options and the planning of multiple scenarios to deal with the uncertainties. On the same call this morning with the doctors, Carlos Migoya, who heads Jackson Memorial Health Systems, was on, and he talked about all the data pointing that the pandemic's going to be around at least until March, April, May of next year. Historically, pandemics tend to last 12 to 18 months. Given the advances in medicine, they estimate that this pandemic will be at least 12 months. So even though you look at the data right now, at least in Miami-Dade and Broward counties, and the data is much, much better than it was a few weeks ago and certainly last month, the numbers still are not where the doctors feel comfortable to allow industries to get back to the old normal, and are stressing constantly that the new normal that we're in has to be in effect at least for the next several months into the new year. The recovery process adopted by each organization will serve as a bridge between the response and how it dealt with the immediate demands of the crisis and what its future will look like, the new normal that we're all getting used to. It's not simply a return to old ways of doing business. The pandemic has created an opportunity for organizations to re-engage and reinvent their workplaces. How organizations handle the recovery may define their brands with both their workforce and their customers, establish their reputations for years to come, determine their future competitiveness, and ultimately define whether they are truly operating as a social enterprise. According to a recent workforce strategies for post-COVID recovery released by Deloitte Touche, they stated that the workforce-related strategies in the recovery are best orchestrated through 4 critical actions: reflection, recommitment to your mission, re-engagement, and rethinking how you do business. These actions can help organizations bridge the crisis response to the new normal by laying the foundation to thrive in the aftermath of this crisis. Let me kind of summarize each of these 4 points quickly. The reflection phase reflect on what has worked, what has been learned, and what has been missed in your response, bringing in many different perspectives from both your employees and your customers. Recommitment, recommit to the workforce well-being and purpose through a focus on physical, psychological, and financial concerns at home and in the workplace. Many of the things that Chris described that Bank United did immediately and has continued to do so. Re-engage and redeploy the workforce to maximize their contribution and potential for rapidly evolving organizational priorities. And lastly, rethink work, workforces, and workplaces. I'm going to spend some time talking about this one because I think it's the most relevant for today's discussion. By rethinking how you work, the workforce, employees, and the workplaces where we work so that we can leverage the experience of the pandemic response and the opportunity to accelerate the future of work. A lot of this work's been taking place over the last several weeks and months. Many of you on this committee, in fact, Chairman Blanco was very actively engaged in Mayor Jimenez's task force on various industries to deal with the reimagining of the workplaces and to allow entities such as restaurants and gyms and all the businesses that are in our community to be able to readapt to the pandemic and be able to reopen from the closures that they experienced in March and April. And as Chair Blanco can attest, we spent many hours on calls with doctors, with industry experts, and the range of industries was everything again from restaurants, healthcare industries, gyms, real estate, so many more, basically every aspect of our economy here in South Florida and Miami-Dade County. And with a lot of work, a lot of recommendations were put in place for initial phases and then gradual phases as the data and the pandemic begins to decrease its impact on our community. Coronavirus and its economic and social fallout is a time machine to the future. Changes that many of us predicted would happen over decades are instead taking place in the span of days, weeks. We've been in this, today is September 10th. I think the economy here in Dade County started to close around mid-March. So we're approaching our 6-month mark of having to deal with these impacts. And as Chris described earlier, many industries from one day to the next had to really pivot and refocus and reimagine the way they worked. To be able to continue doing what they're doing, especially those essential businesses like banks and public safety, police, fire, and some of those critical industries that are so important to our society. We have seen rapid shifts to virtual and remote work and education, new levels of partnerships within and across ecosystems, and unprecedented levels of flexibility, teaming, and adaptability. And as Chris described, the camaraderie, the teamwork has been so important because we're all in this together. This was all so new to everyone. No one had ever dealt with anything like this. And if people didn't come together around their mission and vision and values, it was almost impossible for a business to survive over the last couple of months. In rethinking work, workforces, and workplaces, organizations are presented with several opportunities. And I'm going to kind of pose a few of those right now. And perhaps, Chris, you and I can kind of engage in a little conversation about some of these. But what all businesses really need to be thinking about are, what will the size of your workforce be? What skills are needed? Are they needed on site, or can they be accessed online or in a hybrid work environment? Which employees should come back to work and when? And which should stay home all the time? How do leaders instill trust in the new employer-employee relationship, both the on-site relationship, the online relationship, and in the hybrid environment, if that's applicable to any of the businesses? How will they ensure employees can be confident about their own safety if they're on site? If more work will be done remotely, what support will the organization provide? Are they going to provide more equipment so employees can continue to work from home, improve technology in their homes so that the connectivity is much better? How can alternative types of workers add flexible capacity to the organization? We're so used to the full-time and part-time employees, but are there other options? Contract employees, interns, apprenticeships, other types of opportunities that can really engage other types of workers that haven't traditionally been tapped into. Is the organization prepared for the increased cyber risk that comes with a dispersed and remote workforce? What better example is that than we've seen in the last couple of weeks here in Miami, with the Miami-Dade County Public School System. As our kids started to go back to school in the last couple of weeks, Miami-Dade County Public Schools worked very hard to put in place measures that would ensure kids would be well educated virtually. And if you follow what's been happening, at least with Miami-Dade County Public Schools, it definitely didn't go according to plan. And part of the issues, as I'm sure you know, were the various cyber attacks that occurred. And could those have been prevented? From what I understand, some of the cyber attacks were done with very common platforms and softwares that are accessible to anybody. A 16-year-old in this community is allegedly, accused of, using some of those very simple platforms to disrupt the entire learning of nearly 300,000 people. That's a concern, and that should be a concern to all businesses. If it can happen to an industry or a sector as large as Miami-Dade County Public Schools that, theoretically have incredible firewalls within their systems, then it can happen to entities that are much, much smaller than the Miami-Dade County Public School System. What messages and commitments can the organization make about compensation, job security, performance management, and promotions in the next few years? How can it better incorporate and leverage digital technologies? Again, Chris described how very quickly, he's the executive vice president of human resources for a bank. And I was a little surprised when you mentioned some of your employees that didn't have direct deposit. I would assume that's probably a requirement for any bank employee, but apparently not. And it isn't. I can tell you in the public sector, we have many, many employees that haven't traditionally used direct deposit methods. And like Chris, like you and your employees at Bank United, we too had no choice but to pivot to that kind of platform for our employees. So increasing and leveraging technology and making sure that employees are comfortable with it is going to continue to be incredibly important. What tools can organizations adopt for virtual work and for adapting to the new practices and ways of working that will make teams and workplaces more effective in the future? In a little bit, I know Chris is going to talk about a very important measure. So we've been now in the last 6 months, a lot of employees working virtually or at least in a hybrid environment. So it'll be interesting to see if the outcomes for certain industries have been impacted in any way. Some have been negative, but some, as Chris will describe, have been very positive, particularly in his industry, and he's going to share some examples of those with us. How does the organization capture and scale productivity that can come with new ways of working, creating these hybrid scenarios of virtual and on-site work? And those are just some of the questions that I've kind of come up with personally for not only my organization, but for the various municipalities within Miami-Dade County. We have a human resources group, Cynthia Lejo, who's the town's HR director. She actively participates and is very engaged. And the HR directors for all the municipalities within Miami-Dade County are continuously connecting with each other to support each other. We're building this plane as we fly it, sailing in this ship as we sail in it. So together, we're all really kind of coming up with ways that are beneficial and consistent to all of us. So those are some of the ones I have. Chris, I'm going to kind of ask you to share some of the examples that I know you've shared with me about productivity and outcomes. Obviously, for the private sector, that's incredibly important. So for an industry such as a bank, what have you seen based on the changes that you made that you described earlier? What are some of the impacts that have been felt as far as your bottom line, the outcome and productivity of your organization?
Sure. No, we're connected. Thank you, Romero. Great overview. So we're connected to the economy, just like any other bank, right? We are part of the fabric of South Florida, and where we're headquartered out of, and so goes the economy, so goes banking. So we're very, very excited about the future that our economy pretty much held. If you look and see what's going on around us, things are progressing. Numbers are down with the virus, thankfully. So we tie it back into that, but we're talking about the workforce of the future, right? That Romero touched on a lot of those. And we're going to have to really start focusing on no more of the 9 to 5 or you on the clock. It's really about the outcomes that our employees can truly produce, being productive, right? And then affecting the bottom line, whatever your goals are as a company, are they tied into that? Do they have buy-in? Do your employees feel like they have a voice and are part of something? If you can make that connection with your employees, it makes it so much easier to drive to that finish line that we're all trying to get to. And at Bank United, obviously taking care of our customers and growing our business and helping our communities grow their businesses. So we're connected into that. When you talk about workforce of the future, we surveyed our employees, and kind of we're hearing this across all industries that, most employees are saying, hey, I probably, if I'm working from home right now, a small percentage are going to say, hey, I want to stay working at home all the time. A small percentage are going to say, hey, no matter what, I want to come back to the office all the time. But in the middle, the majority of people are saying, hey, I'm looking for some sort of hybrid. I can be productive at home for a couple of days out of the week, but I don't want to lose the connection to the mothership, right? Of being in the office, working with other employees. It was funny at Bank United, we have a very popular softball league. And I was on a call the other day saying, hey, I just have not figured out how to have a virtual softball league yet, but we're going to work on it. And so you got to have your IT components in place to support that work from home. Your IT security is paramount, obviously. And then really, how are you going to measure your employees? At Bank United, we have a mid-year check-in. It's not a review. It is a check-in. How are things going? How are you doing? What do you want to focus on? And if there's any goals that the manager wants to put in there, is like, hey, for the rest of the year, let's focus on X, Y, and Z. So that's one component as we go into annual reviews at the end of the year that we'll try to start measuring those outcomes that we want to look at as far as this year. And this year is an anomaly for all of us, right? So many changes, so many things are happening. I touched on it earlier. Talk to your employees that are parents that are working from home. You talk about having your hands full. I have multiple people on the HR staff that are, juggling those tasks as we speak. And when I talk to them on a regular basis, it is a challenge would be an understatement. So, with that being said, and when we look at employees, we, at least from HR, when we look at our employees, there's three things we want employees to focus on a daily basis, right? The first is their customer. Whatever that customer base is, if you have an internal customer, external customer, you got to focus on your customer and make sure you're taking care of them. The second thing is, what have you done to help your coworker, right? Every single day, all of us need help. Romero, myself, nobody's perfect. And as we go through all these times, what are we doing for our colleagues, for our coworkers, and really helping them during these difficult times? And it may just be as simple as, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee this morning, do a virtual call, and not talk about business. I've had staff meetings where we've had pet day, and everyone just introduced their pet. And if you didn't have a pet, you could do whatever, you could introduce whatever you wanted to introduce. I'm gonna have a little bit of background noise, I apologize. And then you're really looking at your coworker. And the third thing is your personal and professional development. So very important that happens on a regular basis, your customer, your coworkers, and yourself. And if you're not spending time on wellness and yourself, Romero's the background noise too.
It's okay.
I'm going to turn it over to you for 1 second. Just give me 2 minutes.
No worries. It sounds like Chris is having the same issue I had earlier, where the folks out here were mowing the lawn, and you could hear the noise, but luckily they finished here quickly. To kind of pick up, I'll let Chris finish with his thought, but to kind of add to some of these other questions that I posed. I work in the public sector. So the public sector is all about service. It's all about people, right? We can't do our business. We can't deliver our mission if we don't have people doing it, because the things that we do are public safety. So we need police officers and firefighters and paramedics to be able to accomplish that part of our mission. We keep our cities clean and beautiful, and we can't do that without the issue that Chris is experiencing and I experienced earlier with sanitation crews and beautification crews, making sure that our areas are nicely kept and cleaned and landscaped, and our garbage is picked up from our homes and so forth. An important function of public sector is our building departments to allow for the economic vitality of our communities, to allow for construction activities so that real estate can then function and move in our community. And you need people to process those permits. You need inspectors to go out and make sure that everything's being done according to code and so forth. So for us in the public sector, it was, a huge challenge to, allow people to work from home. It just wasn't possible. As difficult as it is to have a virtual softball game, It's very difficult to have a virtual police officer. It just doesn't work, or firefighter or paramedic or any of those other services that I talked about. So at least in the public sector, we really had to come up with ways that ensures that people are safe, they're supporting each other, they're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, following the recommendations from the CDC and the doctors and so forth, yet at the same time, still being able to do their jobs. And I look at our community in Miami Lakes and so many of our businesses, we have so many small businesses. In fact, most of our community is made up of smaller businesses that you need people, right? It's the restaurants, it's the boutiques and the shops along Main Street. It's the retail shops, it's the service industry, and you need people to do that. Even the bank, even though the lobbies of banks are still closed, the work continued in one way. And the pivot to technology had to happen. My mom lives in the town. She's 89 years old. She's old school because she's 89. She should be old school. So she never trusted any kind of digital formats to deposit checks or do any kind of banking or anything. But guess what? With the pandemic, she had to transition. I told her, hey, you want this check deposited? You're going to have to do it digitally because there's no other way to do it. So either you hold on to the check, put it under your mattress, or you let technology deposit it for you. And guess what? 6 months later, my 89-year-old mom sits at her computer in her office, in her home, and she goes on to her website of her bank and she watches how her money is growing, very small, but she follows the market. She's able to look at her account. I've taught her how to deposit her checks and she's doing it and so forth. So it's an example of how both the customers had to pivot and both the employees providing that service have had to pivot. So Chris, I think it sounds quieter now, so I'm going to give it back to you. I think you were sharing with us.
Right. Timing's everything in life, Romero. Yeah, when the blower's going right outside your door, my door here, I apologize to everybody this morning. Thank you for your patience, and Romero, thank you for jumping in. When we pivoted out, many of the business owners here are very, very familiar with the PPP program that came out of the federal government that was administered through the banks, right? So it was hard for us to argue about employee productivity when we closed more loans in a month than we typically have in almost a year at the bank, right? So, what we were concerned about really is employee burnout, and I would, encourage all you guys, it depends what industry and what's going on with your employees. Is the stress on employees right now? We've been really pushing people hard to take time off. And it's hard to encourage people to take time off when you say, what do I do? Where can I go when when we were shelter in place for so long? So one thing that we typically give a bank of days off, a PTO bank for employees so they can use it as they see fit during the year, knowing that a lot of our employees may not be able to have the opportunity to get all days in during the year. For the first time ever at the bank, we're actually going to roll over a week of time so that hopefully next year we'll all be seeing better days and have more flexibility so that employees can take time for themselves and their families. And I really push that really hard to make sure that all of us as professionals, in the digital age, there is no downtime. And so to take time off to refresh is very, very important. And it's part of our wellness component that we want people to take care of themselves. So when I talk about personal development and professional development, that may be as open as, did you take time for yourself? Did you read a book? Did you go for a walk? Did you spend time with your family? Those are all things that help us balance out as professionals as we can move forward. Because all of our plates are so full, and what Romero has to handle between the police department and the city and any municipality, working back for a Memorial Healthcare System. I still keep in touch with many of my colleagues. Those are the true heroes. I mean, you guys that are out there, protecting our communities, taking care of the sick during this time while exposing themselves to the virus. All the hospitals in Dade County, the Baptist healthcare system, not that I don't want to exclude anybody in case you're associated with another healthcare system, have just done an awesome job. I've worked with doctors and nurses for actually the majority of my career. Banking's catching up now since I'll finish 8 years here with Bank United at the end of the month. And it's just phenomenal what those people have sacrificed to take care of us, to take care of our community and our family. So I applaud the true heroes that have kept us safe during this time. As a business owner, make sure you're taking care of your employees, make sure you're communicating with them more than ever. And that's what we've talked about, is time to over communicate, listen to them, find out what they're going through and get them help, whatever help we can provide to them to help them through. And there's tons of educational material out there. we've partnered with a company that literally we do an educational offering every single day about how to handle stress, how to better communicate, how to better engage, you name it. We just try to cover all topics for our employees. And when I send the stuff out, we get so bombarded in our emails. I'm thinking, is this really going to get, can people really are going to appreciate this or have time for it? The response we have gotten from our employees has been overwhelmingly positive, where the company that we're utilizing literally wants to use this as best practice because our employees are going in on the weekends to watch the offerings because they are actually value added to them and they're enjoying them. So the more tools we can give to our employees right now, listening to them, they want to do well. The employees are thankful for their job. And we saw so many of our fellow Americans lose their jobs at the beginning and during this pandemic. To be able to keep people employed and engaged is paramount. And you'd be surprised how appreciative and how productive your employees will be with your support. Romero?
Yeah, Chris, let me just add, I mentioned earlier that in, at least for municipalities, we've got a couple of different groups. The city managers have a group, the HR directors have a group. I mentioned Cynthia from the town is very active and engaged in the HR group at the municipal level. So my advice to, the small businesses in our town is find those kind of groups. So this committee, the town's economic development committee, is a great group to plug into. The chamber, the local chamber, is a great group as well, because at least I found with that HR group, the managers group, as we're kind of experiencing all of this together, and we have common issues that we're all dealing with, it's been so helpful to have a support group and just kind of people to bounce things off that are in our industry. So colleagues in other businesses, but we're all going through the same thing. So it's been incredibly helpful to network and connect and learn from each other and kind of support and guide each other over the last couple of months. For the Managers Association, I happen to be the president of the Miami-Dade City County Management Association. And we would meet monthly prior to the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, we started meeting weekly. And it's been so helpful to connect on a weekly basis. We meet for an hour from 2:30 to 3:30 every Tuesday. We check in, we kind of go through some issues. If there are some lessons learned, we talk about those. If there's some suggestions about some things that we're possibly thinking about doing, we discuss those as well. And every week at the conclusion of the meeting, I ask the same question. I say, should we meet next week? And overwhelmingly, everybody says, absolutely. This is so helpful to find a network of colleagues that you can kind of communicate with and touch base with and kind of explore ideas and bounce different things off of each other. So my advice is for the small businesses in our town, if there are entities or organizations that can help you do that, I encourage you to seek them out. Again, the town's Economic Development Committee is a great resource and can certainly help you in that regard, as well as the local Chamber of Commerce, I know, is a great resource too. So I strongly encourage all our businesses in our town, now more than ever, we need to kind of come together. We need to support each other, and we need to learn from each other so that we can all thrive, right? And that's what it's all about. And I mentioned earlier that on the call this morning with the task force that the county has in place with the doctors, Carlos Magoya from Jackson said, we're going to be in this for several more months. We've got another 6 months or so of dealing with all of these issues: facial coverings, separation, social distancing, limits in our restaurants, certain occupancy levels and those kinds of things, curfews, all kinds of different things that we're going to continue to have to deal with over the next several months leading into the new year. So we got to stick together and we got to work together. So colleagues in our organizations, as Chris mentioned earlier, that teamwork is so important, but that teamwork amongst different businesses kind of coming together and helping to support each other, I think is super important as well. Chris, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, just, we keep talking about the employee and employee fulfillment, right? And that's going to be different for everybody. I used to talk, prior to the COVID, right? We talk about, employee fulfillment maybe for, a parent to go see their child in the Halloween parade at their school, and how important that is to give them that time off to be a part of that, as opposed to somebody else that may not have children, their fulfillment may come through getting time off to take an educational offering. So it's really getting to know, there's not a one size fits all for employees during this time or ever, in my opinion. It's getting to know your employees. What is their true fulfillment as an individual and as a professional, and helping them to achieve that and making sure they feel connected and that they have a voice. And any type of mentoring that you can offer to your employees will come back to you tenfold as far as productivity, engagement, and people that will help you reach your goals as a business. So in closing, take care of your employees. And typically, 99.9% of the time, they're going to take care of you as well. That'll be in closing. I can't thank you enough, Romero, for a partnership this morning. Great overview. I don't know, I believe we're going to be opening it up for some questions at this point.
Yes, if there's any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, and you guys can go ahead and proceed. I'm monitoring the Zoom chat. I don't see any questions through there. Ramiro and Chris, if you have any questions directly from your messages, just let me know.
I do have
Romero, this is what go ahead.
Chris, I actually did get a message, and it's actually from the town of Miami Lakes, and they asked me to also mention that I mentioned some of the resources, the town's economic development committee, the Miami Lakes Chamber of Commerce, but the town itself, and particularly the human resources department for the town of Miami Lakes is also a resource to small businesses. A lot of the small businesses aren't fortunate to have a Chris, as an HR professional to kind of help guide policies and procedures. So the town makes itself available for HR guidance, particularly on some of the federal and state and local mandates that are required for HR purposes. So if there's a small business in our town that needs some guidance, please feel free to reach out to the town of Miami Lakes, to Human Resources Department. And there are resources as well that can potentially at least point you in the right direction or provide you the information that they have that might be helpful to you.
Yeah, Romero, that's so important for anybody who's out on the call that has a small business. The laws, the rules, the regs have changed so many times. And when we first went into this in March, I remember on a call, and we're rapidly redoing policies, and we're working around the clock, me and my staff, to get all these things done. And I was on this one call, they said, hey, as soon as you finish all those policies, you might as well just throw them out the window because there's going to be changes in the future. So I kind of sat back and laughed to myself about that remember, a policy is just going to be a guideline, and the key is going to be communicating with your employees. But you do need to understand federal, state, and local municipality guidelines, rules, and laws. So that's a very important point. And I think it's a great resource to offer. Thank you, Romero.
Brandon, any other questions?
I don't see any further questions. I'm also monitoring our Facebook channels as well, but I don't see any other questions. I don't know if you guys want to make any other comments.
Just in closing, again.
Romero, I'll let you make a few comments. Yeah.
Sure, let me go, and then Chris, you can wrap it up since you started.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to the town for organizing these webinars. Like I said earlier, I've attended a few, so they've been incredibly helpful. It's a great resource to our residents and our businesses, so it's greatly appreciated, and to the Economic Development Committee as well. And to Bank United, you've been super supportive. It's as a resident of the town of Miami Lakes, I'm very proud that Bank United is headquartered in our town. It's a beautiful presence, a beautiful campus. So it adds a lot to our community. So Chris and Steve, who's also on, he's with Bank United on the Economic Development Committee. Thank you both for all you do and for all that you add to our town. So it's appreciated.
Romero, thank you so much. Yeah, and I definitely wanted to make sure that Steve Brema was recognized today. He's a long-term Bank United leader. We're lucky to have him. He sits right there by the, what's the best way to describe, Steve, where you're located? Right there off of 62nd, 67th. And
yeah, for 16 years, I've been given a free plug to Chicken Kitchen, right next to Chicken Kitchen across from Main Street. But it's been a very positive and good experience with the town, Chris. And thank you both for making the time for this. I thought it was a very good very good information and on point. So appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope you guys found this value added this morning. I know all of our time is extremely valuable. Hopefully this puts something in your toolkit to take back to you and your employees. Once again, if there's anything from a human resources perspective, the town has resources available to you. Anything from a banking perspective, obviously we're more than happy to help and assist in any way that we can. Romero, it's been a sheer pleasure. Great job this morning. I want to thank you and the team, Steve, and everybody within the town of Miami Lakes that has helped us make this happen this morning. I hope you've enjoyed the time as much as I have, and thank you so much for joining this morning. Remain safe, and we'll see you again in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you,
And in
everybody.
closing, on behalf of the town, we'd like to thank Chris and yourself and your team from Bank United for partnering with us to make these webinars possible, and specifically Ramiro for making today's human resources and today's economy webinar possible. And we'd like to thank all members of the public for joining us today.